This week on Alternative Eye, we are honored to introduce a man whose career has taken him into the heart of some of the most complex investigations of our time. Kenneth Strange Jr. is a former FBI special agent, a licensed private investigator, an international fraud investigator, and an author whose work spans counterterrorism, global fraud, cartel investigations, and public corruption. For more than 2 decades, he operated inside the systems most people only hear about, building cases, leading investigations, and navigating the structural realities that shape outcomes. His latest book, A Cop's Son, is now available on audiobook, bringing his firsthand experiences to life in a powerful new format. What makes Ken pivotal to Alternative Eye is not just his resume, it's his discipline, his ethical grounding, and his ability to cut through the noise to identify what actually moves an investigation forward and what stops it. As we step into more complex case analysis and deeper conversations about institutional barriers, Ken will be joining us. This isn't just a guest appearance for us, it's the beginning of something substantial. Ken, we are truly honored.
Ken Strange, it is such a pleasure to have you here on Alternative Eye. And joining me, Carrie Drobe in Chicago. What an incredible group of people here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be on with you guys and looking forward to it. And I've been following you for at least the past few months now. And so I'm excited to be here.
I appreciate your encouragement. I look forward to growing that relationship.
Same here. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Definitely. Today, I want to introduce our audience to you and have them understand really what motivates and drives you. So I would love to start with how you got into what you did.
Yeah, I think I'd have to go back in time and start with my father because he was probably my greatest influence. Father, hero type, he was my hero. He had a remarkable career with NYPD, 38 years. He started in 1953. He retired in 1991. So that's like 4 decades. And he saw it all, lived through it all, from the papal visit to New York City, the first one back in the 60s. He was in the Harlem riots in 1964, Son of Sam, Serpico, Knapp Commission. I mean, he did it all. So if anybody should be writing a book, it should have been him. He's the one that should have written a book. But he was a tremendous influence. And he had a remarkable sense of a duty. He was the quintessential public servant. And he had a great empathy for people, a great reverence for humanity. And I think, when I saw that, I said, I want to be like you. I like what I see. So there was a seed planted there with law enforcement. I was attracted to law enforcement. I liked the people that surrounded him. And, there are bad cops, of course, as well. But he was always with good cops. And growing up with a police officer, you saw things and you just said, I want to be a good guy. I want to join the A team. So tremendous influence. I think that's what started it. But really, it's a little more complex than that because his influence extended beyond that to the point where he actually introduced me. And I guess this is part of empathy and curiosity in other cultures and stuff. So he would go and he would have his hair cut over in Brooklyn, a place called the Junction near Brooklyn College. And he would take us, my brother and I, and he would speak or try to speak with the Hispanic barbers over there. These were Dominicans and Puerto Ricans. And so he made the effort, and then he would go home, and on the weekends, like early in the morning before any of us would get up, he would be listening to Spanish records and trying to study Spanish records. And I caught him one morning. I came down early. I said, Dad, what are you doing? I'm hearing this strange language. And he said, son, join me. I want to introduce you to Spanish. And so he introduced me to these records. I loved it. I mean, I absolutely loved hearing the way it rolled off his tongue, like Isabel, Arturo. And I said, wow, cool, I'm going to try that. And I fell in love with the language, and that started me towards a career in education. But always in the back of my mind was law enforcement. But here I was beginning on a career in education. Specifically, I became a Spanish teacher, high school teacher originally.
What stands out in your mind first that you remember listening to from those Spanish records?
Well, it was, Melissa, it was just one of these I couldn't tell you the name of the record. It was like Learn Spanish, and I just remember the cover was an exotic cover with a beautiful woman with dark hair and this matador with his cap, and it just looked very intriguing as well. So the whole thing kind of set me up for Spanish, changed my life. I ended up in Spain, studying in Madrid, making numerous trips to Spain. So that again, this is my dad. He was a different person. He was a different cat. When people think of cops, he was not the typical cop. He was very different. He kind of a Renaissance guy, reading, writing. He had a sailboat. I mean, he was into everything. That's where it starts.
I was just gonna add that I find that just so powerful when you have such a strong bond with a mentor like that, especially in this
Yeah,
line of work.
yeah.
That's really impressive and interesting from your background.
Well, thanks, Carrie. And I just remember when I had kind of gone through my career teaching English as a second language and Spanish, and I came back to law enforcement, and I asked him, and I think I want to be an NYPD police officer, and he said, "Son, law enforcement is much bigger than NYPD." He said, "Have you considered federal agencies like the DEA or the FBI or the any of those?" And I said, "No, I have not really. I mean, I've read about the FBI, like, I've seen it on television. It looks pretty cool." But he said, "You should open up your vista here, and there's a lot more than NYPD." But he said, I'm certainly, that's such a nice compliment that you would even think of that. But that's just the way he was.
He sounds like such a passionate person with so much depth, and he had so much to offer as a father.
Yeah, he really was that. I mean, I didn't even realize until actually when he passed away, and I found all these photos in a box. I didn't realize that he had a very close relationship with Mayor Ed Koch in New York City, or that he was a friend of one of the New York City Cardinals there. There would be the St. Patrick's Day parade, and he would be with the Cardinal. That was a group of people that he was with, I guess, because of his position. But he never really talked a lot about that or tried to impress people with that type of thing. And he had a very interesting relationship with the publisher of, his name was Michael Korda, and one of Simon and Schuster. So Michael Korda was from England originally, and just a family of artists and writers and this and that. So my dad became a very close friend with him, and they would go out. And when my father was working at One Police Plaza in New York City, they would go out and they'd have lunch and they would talk. And my father would come home and he'd say, "Son, Michael, when he starts to write," I said, "No, Dad, he starts to write at 5 in the morning every day, so disciplined, 5 to 7. You think about it." He would share that stuff with me, and it was in the back of my mind. Eventually it clicked for me, but this is the type of world eventually where he ended up, which was good for him. Good for him.
Lots of stories, I'm sure, from NYPD. It's an interesting trajectory that he took. I mean, it sounds like he was a Renaissance man, had a lot of varied interests. You channel that into law enforcement is actually pretty interesting. That he would be dealing with the darker side of life.
Yes. Yes. Carrie, one of the earliest memories I have was I think he took us to the police precinct. He was going to maybe pick up his paycheck. I was with my brother. And this was in maybe the early 60s. They had a paddy wagon there with prisoners. And he went up to the prisoners with us, and they're kind of in this vehicle looking out, and he started talking to them. And I'm like, wow. And they were friendly to him. He was friendly to them. And introduced us, the kids. I said, "What was that all about? Who are these people?" And he said, "Unfortunately, sometimes people do things and they get in trouble and they get arrested and they have to spend time in jail. But I just wanted you to meet these people." And it's just kind of a remarkable memory that I had. But even more important, when he would come home from work, he had time for us. He would say, "Okay, where's the football?" And he would take my brother and I, and we'd throw the football around. Or he'd take my sisters for riding bicycles, just to spend time with family. He was a real family guy. And I think there's one story where he came home to my mom and he said, "I've got this offer to go to Scotland Yard for 6 months and to be there and study how the British do it. It's a 6-month assignment." And they talked about it. And eventually my father said, "No, I can't do it. I have a young family and I have to devote my time to my family." And I'm thinking to myself, that's something maybe I would have jumped on that but I'm a different person. But he was very true to his family.
That must be why you turned out to be such an incredible person. I have no doubt about that.
I don't know about that, but yeah, he was certainly a wonderful wonderful influence. And my mother was a terrific lady as well. So she loved languages as well. She said she said study Latin, and I studied Latin, and I'm glad I did.
And if I may, there's something that I've noticed that I've studied as far as dynamic minds, especially in law enforcement, legal fields. There are people that they've just tapped into a higher understanding of things. They understand the inner workings of people. They especially know people. And from what you're describing earlier, you mentioned about the records and how he was immersed in that. And I find that to be kind of a integral component as far as how some of these minds really kind of just tap further into, and it could be down to physics, neurology, I don't know. But
Mhm.
there's something about that. You know, I'm a musician. It's a big
Mm,
part of my
mm.
life. And how I blow off steam is I love records. Okay. So I'm obsessed with all different kinds of, but
Good.
I can also tune into it and I'll mimic the voices. I'll do these crazy vocalizations. And it really helps me cross the darkness. It
Mhm.
helps me be more present with my son, and my relationships are just deeper. And
Yep.
I don't know how to explain it. Harry and I, we connect on this all the time because
Yeah.
we have so much joy in our lives, especially with
Wonderful.
our families and our relationships and our kids.
Good
And
f
we
good.
really navigate that darkness and it
Yeah.
doesn't consume us.
Yes. Yeah, that you're mentioning some themes here that are kind of very interesting to me. So, my parents were faith-based people. Really looking back, my father should never have succeeded in life because he overcame some tremendous challenges growing up. I mean, real challenges, and to the point once where he was defending his mother, and you could kind of imagine the scenario where that could happen. And he said, "I've had enough." He had a telescope, and he took it over his father's head and knocked him out cold. Thought he had killed him, and so he and my grandmother took off. They left the house and they said, "We may have killed your father." Just found out this about a year or two ago from his brother, and he told me the story. And I thought to myself, "Geez, if that had happened, if he had indeed killed his father, and would have had every right to do, I think, to do so, because this was just a long period of time where this was going on, abuse." So, and I just thought to myself, if he had been arrested, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. It would have been a totally different, a totally different future for everybody. But thank God the father was just knocked out, and when he came to, and it could have been a lot worse.
Do you believe that's destiny, Carrie? Pen? Do you believe that
I'm
that
just
is?
I love what I was thinking as you were telling that story was I'm really fascinated by people's origin stories because I think that's what sets them on a path. And so it's really interesting to me that he witnessed such violence. You know, he grew up in a family that was the norm, was violence. And so I think it's kind of interesting that he chose, I mean, makes sense now why he chose law enforcement with all of
Yeah,
those
yeah,
interests,
yeah,
right? So I mean, I'm always
yeah.
like zeroing in on where's the origin of that.
Yeah, yeah, and he was searching for something early on. His older brother took off. He just said, I can't live in this house. I've got to get out." But it coincided with World War II, so the older brother first he runs away to join the Finnish army to fight the Russians, but his mother, my grandmother, catches him and brings him home. And then finally, Germany declares war on the country. And finally, yes, I can get out of this house. And so he's off and gone. And that's a whole different story. That guy, Lieutenant Colonel Green Beret, that's a story in itself. My uncle, my father, kind of stayed behind, and he put up with a lot of grief. But he said high school saved him. He got into the Glee Club. He got in with a good group of friends, which stayed his friends for all his life, and that helped him out. But he had no religion in his life. But he started to read Thomas Merton, and actually joined the Trappist monks for a very short period of time, maybe several weeks, where he was thinking about becoming a monk. Thank God that
Wow.
didn't happen. I wouldn't be here. He was searching. He was searching for something. I think in the end, he found it, and he led a good life. He just his whole thing was example and leaving a legacy. People respected him. He was a straight shooter.
So passion, in a way, was his faith or his
Yes,
North
yes.
Star, as you say.
I think he has a thing on his grave, something about love. One of the apostles saying, "But the greatest gift is love." That type of thing on his gravestone. So he was a great guy, great guy.
Well, I think that's such an interesting philosophy to live by when you understand that love for other people, love for people we serve, it's a privilege to be able to experience that. And I know with my work, the more I do what I do, the more I expand my heart. I feel it open for all people, even people I never would have imagined I had compassion for.
Right.
And it deepens
Yeah.
a very rich spiritual experience. I really want to talk about the beginning of your career and the mindset that you went into law enforcement with and how that evolved over time.
Sure. Eventually, all of this was leading me. I went through a number of doors, and as I explained, teaching, and then the teaching led to Saudi Arabia, where I was living and teaching the royal family, the Saudi royal family, members of the Saudi royal family for about 5 years. So at that time, I'm learning about Islam. I'm learning Arabic. I actually knew the difference between Sunnis and Shiites. And I realized that the world, especially the Middle East, was a very volatile region with a lot of passion. I had some great experiences over there, but I also had one close call with some friends. We went into the wrong town where there were fundamentalist jihadists, and they stupid me. I had like a crucifix or some kind of medal, a Christian medal, and they came right into my face and said, "What is this? Are you Christian?" And I said, "Yes, I'm Christian." And they said, "Oh, this is bad," yelling at us, spitting at us. In the end, they were throwing rocks, and we had to get out of this town. Came face to face with the ugly side of religion, because actually Islam is a very interesting religion, and it's got some very beautiful tenets to it. Praying 5 times a day. Imagine that. That's amazing. Alms to the poor. All of that, which I learned, and I said, this is good. But at the same time, I'm learning about terrorism. I'm there maybe all of a month, and the rebels take the holy mosque in Mecca, and it's a bloodbath. And then at the end of it, after 2 weeks of fighting, they capture what's left of the rebels, and they parade them into different cities in Saudi Arabia, Riyadh, where I live, being one of them, and they beheaded those people. And that's what they did. And I remember being asked to go to a beheading. "Mr. Ken, would you like to see a beheading? It will be Friday after prayers." And I said, "Thank you for the invitation. I don't think I could do that. I couldn't unsee that." But that's the type of environment. Was the most orthodox of Islamic countries. Women were second-class citizens. They couldn't drive. They couldn't do anything. That has changed, which is fantastic. But it was a very interesting society. But all of that is kind of leading me on this path. Right after the Mecca thing, they burned the embassy, our U.S. embassy in Pakistan, killed 2 of our people, and I was taking this all in. I was absorbing this, and I thought maybe the FBI is the way to do it. I know that they do terrorism cases, and all of this, I can see that it's coming our way. 5 years there, it was coming our way. Abu Nidal and Islamic Jihad and all of those groups, terrible groups. So and so I get back to the States, and I go to graduate school, and then this graduate school is where the CIA and the FBI heavily recruited. They were looking for people with an international background, people that could speak languages, people that had worked overseas. And I was being courted by both the CIA and the FBI. I opted for the FBI, and I'm glad I did. The FBI was not ready for what was coming, and 9/11, the first World Trade bombing, just weren't ready. They had one guy come in and teach us, like maybe for an hour, about Middle East terrorism. I should have taught the course, looking back. But they knew nothing. Again, the FBI was, at the time, it was more catered toward mafia cases, working mafia and working bank robberies. That was their specialty. But we were certainly not ready for what was to come.
How did they get ready, Ken?
Things happened, shit happened, and
Yeah.
you just had to roll with the punches after that. For all of this, and again, this is kind of all these doors that opened to me and I went through. I was in the right place at the right time. And I ended up on a joint terrorism task force in Newark, New Jersey, Renaissance City. They called it Renaissance City, but I didn't see the Renaissance going on there. But so all of this going on, I show up on the squad, and boy, these young men and women were just, I'm like, wow, you got to bring your A game to this place because, excuse me, there's so much going on. There's so many terror groups out there that you couldn't even imagine the array of terror groups. But I show up on the squad, and my boss says, "Strange, I don't know how you got here. You shouldn't be. You should be doing applicant work. You should be, and at the time that was the route. You advanced first going out and interviewing people that were applying for federal jobs to get your experience interviewing people. And I understand that, but hey, come on, I could speak Arabic. I knew all about terrorism more than anybody on the squad for sure. But he said, I don't know how you got here. I wouldn't have picked you myself, but you're here, so get busy. That was the welcome.
Well, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Anyway, he eventually, that guy moved on, but the work was amazing, and we were, Carrie and Melissa, we were dealing with a Black Liberation Army, some pretty bad people in that group, all the Islamic groups, Sikh terrorism as well, Jewish Defense League, every nationality. I mean, I called it the candy store of terrorism. You could work any group, and you ended up working all kinds of group, and it was addictive work. It was round the clock. And then, my specialty was cultivating informants or confidential sources. And again, this kind of intersection of destiny and luck, because I knew the cultures, I knew the people, I knew the language. So for me, it was kind of a natural thing to go into these communities and ask for help. I said, help. And for the most part, the people in the Muslim communities were like, yes, we want to help you. We know there are bad apples. We see them in our mosque. And we don't want these people here. Please help us. And I said, you can help us. I'll help you. That's how it works. So Middle East terrorism became my thing.
That's a fascinating skill set as well. You sort of cut through a lot of the rules, I guess, if you want to call it that, the bureaucracy of the actual
Yeah,
agency that you worked for,
right.
because you have an intuitive sense of how to get people to inform, how to work in that underworld, if you will, which is
Right. Yeah.
a very interesting and dangerous skill set. But I think it requires
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
intuitive side, to kick in.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. I loved what I did, and you mentioned danger. Yes, and kind of funny stuff. I mean, having a sense of humor in this profession is a must. You should, otherwise you become so cynical and so beat down. It make and I met people like that. But if you have a sense of humor, that'll help you get through it. But just understanding the human condition, see people trying to make a living, people coming from other cultures. For me, it was fascinating, and I was a great listener. So I would ask people questions. Tell me about your life. What do you aspire to do? What are your goals and your kids and this? I'm interested, and I would get interested in some of the people. Now, some of the people were there just for money. Okay, if they had good information, okay, but some of them, like one guy said, please help us get rid of these people. They're not Muslim. They're not Muslim. They're killers. They're lost. They're mentally ill or whatever they were. So, but I remember one fella calling me up. He was a Lebanese guy, and he called me up and he said, I heard about you, and I don't think I like what you're doing. And I'm like, what? Yeah, nice to meet you.
Yeah, no shit.
And he says, I'm this guy, I'm his name. And he said, and I run this place. I run Newark. I run New Jersey. I'm the one. You got to go through me.
Good to know.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Wow.
I'm
Okay.
gonna take that mask off.
Can I meet you?
Yeah, where are you at?
Yeah. So we met. We met, and you could talk about at the end of our lunch, we were like buddies. And he goes, okay, you don't have to go through me.
Huh?
We can become friends. I said, that's great. That's great. Let's become friends.
Where's the
Just,
boss?
but when I left, and this is in the book, when I left and I went with another federal agency in Washington, D.C., and then I ended up in Costa Rica, working overseas in Costa Rica. I'm in Costa Rica maybe just a few weeks, just getting used to my environment there. in the near the embassy, and I got a call from the FBI in Washington. It was a unit chief, and he said, "You're Ken Strange." I said, "Yeah. What's wrong?" And he said, "Well," I said, "What did I do wrong? Why are you calling me?" And he said, "Well, we just want to give you a heads up." About what? About what? And he said, congratulations, you made it on the on a list, a Hezbollah list. You're on their list, but don't worry." Don't worry, you're with two other American people, another FBI agent from New York and a CIA officer. So I'm like, oh my God, please. And he says, I don't know. So I was kind of freaking out a little bit, and I didn't work Hezbollah, but I guess I must have, in my work, I must have rubbed elbows with Hezbollah people. Just I wasn't aware of it. I was looking at other groups, but he said, "Are you packing?" And I said, "You mean like to leave? Packing to leave?" And he goes, "No, are you packing a weapon?" And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not. We're not allowed to carry weapons overseas with this agency." And he said, "Well, I recommend you get in touch with diplomatic security over there and tell them what's happened, and they can protect you and your wife and the kids." And so, yeah, there was always that danger. Sometimes I didn't see it, but it was there.
You were
How did you get
popular.
off the list?
What's that?
How did you get off the list?
I don't know if I ever got off the list. They probably didn't hear from me after a while because I was with this new agency. Yeah, no, it was just funny because I didn't work Hezbollah. Like I said, these people would morph into from one group to another. It was credible information because this guy said it's two different sources from friendly nations overseas that have corroborated this information. So keep an eye open. But by that time, I was out of the mix with the FBI, and I was with the other agency.
Well, your reputation certainly traveled quick. I think the word on the street.
Yeah, well, I always called that guy that called me, and I said, "Is it okay to come out today? Can I go into the street?" "No, Mr. Ken, please, you are my friend now." It's just crazy stuff. Yeah, It was an interesting job, and in fact, that probably the most incredible thing that happened to me. It's in my book, but just we had received some information. It was building up to the Gulf War. This was 1991, and this was with Saddam Hussein in Kuwait and this whole thing. And we were getting ready. We were on a war footing. We could all see it coming. So we were running around and trying to get information and making sure that Saddam Hussein would not kill any American citizens, at least in our area. And I got the communication late on a Friday, and it said that you have some people in your backyard that we think can help the country, might have some information. And it's late Friday and people were like leaving to go home. And I said, but when I saw this and I read it, I had this incredible feeling about this particular task. And so I jumped in my car and I drove out to this place. It was just like all my complete background with these people that I met. It was just so seamless, and so it was just like it was just not easy. But I just knew I had such a positive attitude about this whole thing. I just knew it was going to turn out. I don't know why, but it did. And then so I meet these people, and I'm doing the Arabic thing. I'm drinking tea with them. I'm chit chatting a little bit in Arabic, and I said to them, I said, "Look, you guys, welcome to our country, and I'm so happy you're here. Here is your chance to help our country, to help your new country. And so, look, I'm not going to pressure you about anything. You have to think this over, and we have the whole weekend to think it over. How about this? On Monday, I'll call you, and you let me know if you're interested in helping me." And when I drove away, I just knew, yes, I'm going to hear back from these guys, and that is exactly what happened. On Monday, they said, "Mr. Ken, we are all in." And it turned out, and I don't want to get into all the particulars, and I do have to protect these people to this day. But the final thing was we heard from the CIA and from the military said the work you did and the work your squad did and the work these people did with you. And I was working this with another agent later, and it shortened the war by 6 months, and it saved numerous lives in the U.S. military. And it was the most incredible thing that ever happened to me in my life. Whenever I'm having a bad day or things aren't going well, I can default to those moments and just think, it just worked out. And it was kind of like my whole life had kind of come to this point with like living overseas and studying and being with people and, my father's type thing. Listen, 80% you're listening, you talk 20%. All of it it was just unbelievable. Still, it's an amazing thing. And it worked out for everybody.
Yes, it did.
You're a
I
good
mean, and you
storyteller
knew.
too.
Yeah, yeah, I'm loving this. I mean, it's incredible. There's so much to dissect. That's why one episode would never do it for you, Ken. So much we could all get into here. Carrie, I would love for you to take over for a moment. If you have anything, you would like to discuss as far as anything, just do your thing, girl.
Carrie, go.
Go.
Hit me with your best stuff, Carrie. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Well, I'm fascinated by the way that you navigate the, informants, get them to open up to you, to talk to you, to trust you. That's the thing that I think comes with having been exposed to different cultures, to different languages, to your father's experiences. I think all of that culminates into your ability to navigate a world that is so foreign to you, and yet you always have top of mind what the mission is, or what is the purpose of what I'm trying to do here. And there's always a higher purpose, right? You're getting information to hopefully help other people. And so I guess along with that, and you sort of hinted at that a little bit, where you're having to still protect identities and protect the information. And so I wondered, as you were doing that, what kinds of obstacles you encountered with that, especially as you write books about some of these operations, investigations, how you
Right.
achieved
Yes.
information.
That's right, Carrie. It's a great point. And so, in order to write these stories, which I did, I had to get it past the FBI's pre-publication unit. And that unit consists of some lawyers. And above all, they're trying to protect sources and methods. And that's understandable. My situation was kind of interesting because I would write some of these stories and I'd say, "Oh no, this is totally innocuous. This is going to just sail right through," only to be surprised when it came back saying half of it is blacked out. I can no longer use the story. And other stories where I said, "Oh, there's no way in hell this is going to make it through," gives away too much in my mind. And yet it would come back like totally unscathed. And it was surprising. So there was really no rhyme or reason to some of the edits that they made. There was one story where they kind of gutted it, and I started to negotiate, and I found out I could negotiate. I said, "I need this story because the end of the story is like so surprising and it'll blow your mind away." And they said, "Yeah, we know, but you have to, you're giving up this and that, and there's a source involved." And I said, "Yeah, but I protected it." And he go, "Well, okay, well, look, here's the deal. Rewrite that and change profession, change name, change interest for the source, and we'll see." And that's what I did, and we were able to come to an agreement. And the story was told. I had to laugh. It's not the real story, but it's pretty close. Yeah. And by the way, some of the questions that you guys came up with were tremendous. I did some research and went back through excellent points. You make some excellent points about everything from the question about immunity, qualified immunity, and things like that. Spot on. I mean, you were right on. Media. How far does media go into investigations? How can they improve? How can they improve the case? How can they help the case? All those questions were amazing questions, by the way. And yeah, I went back through some of my things, and good for you. I mean, you guys are you're really onto something.
Well, it's the support of amazing people like you guys that really allows for me to see the full picture, see what we're up against, because I never had a badge. I've had a different career path. It's
Right,
very unconventional.
right,
And there is a lot to digest as a civilian when you're on that side of the fence
absolutely.
in the private sector versus being in the public sector. Carrie's in court. You guys are doing these incredible things within the system, and you are highly qualified to do so. And that is why with Alternative I, as a civilian, I wanted to be Nancy Drew whenever I was growing up. Starting in second grade, I had every damn book under my bed,
Right.
and sleeping on top of those books must have did something for me, because
Yeah,
my 12-year-old self, my 10-year-old self would have been like, yes. You know what I mean? And we're talking about the culmination of hard work and dedication.
Yeah.
It's been a natural evolution for me
Mhm.
to come where I am today. And it took a lot of balls for me to come public. It was,
Right.
especially as a remote viewer, coming out the closet, so to speak, because
Yeah.
there's so many people that are going to hear that and they're going to
Yeah.
say, "Psh, this
Who
girl," but maybe they'll pay a little bit more attention, right?
yeah, who is this person? What is what? Yeah, no,
Look at
absolutely,
these
but
claims.
but and listen, go girl. I'm telling you, go girl. You do what you have to do what's in your heart. We had talked about CrimeCon, briefly, you and I, Melissa.
Yes.
CrimeCon really opened my eyes, because it's not really the world that I was doing different violations and different things, but I was impressed by one. There was a serial killer in, maybe it was Oregon, and the police were doing nothing. And all these women started disappearing, and the police were like, they weren't connecting the dots. But one of the mothers of the deceased ladies took it upon herself and said, no, I'm going to solve this case. And she went out there and they did a book. Brian Enton is an investigative journalist. He actually has been involved in this case, but they were very careful. They did their thing, and the cops said, "Yeah, go ahead. You're all fools, but you do what you must." And we understand. We don't see a connection, but apparently there was a connection. I think there were 5 or 6 women, and these carpool moms. I think they have a book out called "Carpool Moms." They solved this case themselves. And in the end, the police had to jump on the bandwagon and say, okay, we're sorry. We should have. And so I thought that was very interesting. And they were very careful. They weren't, they were low profile. They were very respectful to victims in this. They were like hitting all those boxes, respect and transparency and not using social media to just overwhelm the police and make them angry. But at the same time, they were persistent. So they were able to kind of navigate all of that and succeed. And that was a very interesting story. I'd never heard the case before. I wrote it down somewhere. I'll provide you with the names, the book, and the serial killer.
Yeah, I think I've and maybe it's the same case, the Golden State Killer, where the journalist was relentless and solved the case and
Right, right, right,
and I think it goes maybe to the point of sort of why I do this work is it's not about solving it necessarily, it's about the truth. It's about finding out, navigating, investigating until finally the truth comes to light. And I think a
right,
lot of departments, institutions, they are stuck on this idea, I've got to solve this. And so they rush to judgment or they have, confirmation bias. I mean, all these things that lead them to the wrong conclusion,
right.
irrespective of whether or not that's true. So it's
Yeah,
very interesting.
that's a great no, that's a great point. Rushing to judgment. I mean, we saw that recently with even the FBI did this. Cash Patel. This was, I guess, the shooting of Charlie Kirk, and right away, we got the guy. We got the guy. Well, no, you didn't get the guy. That you apprehended someone, a person of interest, but they were saying we got the guy, and I thought that was a bit premature. You might want to. I know you're new to the job, but you might want to just make sure. You know,
Yeah.
do a proper vetting, a proper interviewing, and then come out with, if you have to come out with a statement. Yeah, sometimes they get it wrong. Mhm.
Even an investigator's mind, right? How they're working, no matter if they're bringing something a little weird or strange, or they're just working off of a typical standard operating procedure that they've been trained on. When we slow down and we really give the listening, like you're talking about, we're understanding the motivations. That is where we're able to do incredible things together as a team, as a think tank. And that was my if it's the Golden State Killer that we're referring to, seeing the power of civilians. That's not the only time that this has taken place. And that's what's so exciting, I think, also for our audience,
Right.
because you have to have the right support for civilians that want to do this work.
As we close out this episode, what stands out most is not just Ken's resume or the cases he's worked, it's the foundation that shaped him. The discipline, the responsibility, the willingness to step into complexity without looking away. Understanding what formed a man like Kenneth Strange Jr. gives us something deeper than biography. It gives us context. and context is what allows serious conversations, we're going to dive further into the themes he alluded to today: the systems of silence, the institutional barriers that stall movement, the tension between procedure and justice, and most importantly, how institutions and civilians can unite rather than operate in opposition. Real change doesn't come from outrage alone. It comes from informed collaboration, structural awareness, and people who are willing to engage honestly. We'll continue these conversations with Ken and with other individuals who have demonstrated courage, integrity, and resilience in the face of complexity. People who are helping reshape what accountability looks like. People who are helping redefine what responsible media can be. And maybe, in the process, what it means to be an American committed to truth, responsibility, and forward movement. We're just getting started. Thank you for tuning in to Alternative Eye Beyond the File. Please visit thealternativeeye.com for the latest updates and more to come. Subscribe to us on YouTube and join the Alternative Eye family.